Sorlian here with another video to help you to be better prepared for your CSEC exam. And in today's video, we'll be looking at the beautiful topic of factorization. And at the end of this video, you should be able to do three things. You should be able to 1. Understand the concept of factorization. 2. Apply the distributive law to factorize expressions. And 3. Factorize algebraic expressions by grouping terms. So let's head straight into the concept. So first of all, factorization is the process of writing an algebraic expression as a product of its factors. And if you look at the word factorization, there's a word that can come from that word. And that word that we can see would be the word factor. So factorization involves factors. So factorization is the process of writing an algebraic expression as the product of its factors. And if you look at the word factorization, immediately you should see the word factor. So factorization, of course, involves factors. And it says here you're expressing an algebraic expression as a product of its factors, and product means multiplying. So simply put, if we have, let's forget about algebra for now. If we have the number 6 and we're asked to factorize 6, we're basically expressing 6 as the product of 2 of its factors. So 2 factors of 6, therefore we can do 3 and 2. And there we have factorized 6. We've expressed 6 as 2 product of its factors. So at the end, whenever you finish factorizing whatever term, you should have 2 factors multiplying each other to give you back the original expression or term that you had. And that is the concept of factorization. At the end of it, you should have 2 factors multiplying each other to give you back the original expression that you had at the top. So let's head into the fourth way that we learn to factorize, which is the distributive law. Before we head into this method of factorization, of course, we must recap what the distributive law is. So the distributive law says, let's say we have A, open bracket, X plus Y, and we're asked to simplify this. The distributive law will tell us that this A has to multiply all the terms in the bracket because that A is directly outside the bracket. So we can multiply the A by the X, which will give us AX, and we can multiply the A by the plus Y, which will give us plus AY. And there we have used the distributive law. So if we are asked now to factorize AX plus AY, we are actually doing what we did in reverse. Instead of distributing the A, we're looking at the 2 terms AX and AY, and we're identifying the common factor between AX and AY. So the common factor would be the thing that we just distributed, because that is the thing we multiplied both terms by. So to factorize this term, using the distributive law, we just do the distributive law distribution in reverse. So we'll have A, open bracket, when we factor out the A from the AX, we're actually, instead of multiplying, we're dividing. So we'll have AX divided by A. This A will cancel out when we factor out the A. So we're left with X plus, and when we factor out the A from that term, we have AY divided by A, because when you're factorizing, you're actually dividing. So A will cancel to that A, so we're left with Y. So all we did was we did the distributive law in reverse. And this is how you factorize this term using the distributive law. It's just to do it in reverse. So that's a simple example. Let's head more into the meat of factorization. So let's say we wanted to factorize the expression 3x plus 6. So these are the common steps you would go through when factorizing. The first thing, you want to identify the common factors. So the steps that you go through to identify the common factors, the first thing to look for would be, you look at the signs. You factor out the sign first. And after you're finished factoring out the signs, you then move on to the coefficients, or as we better know them as the numbers. So after you finish with the signs, you move on to the numbers, and then you move on to the variables, or better known as the letters. So you factor out the signs first, then you factor out the numbers, and then you factor out the letters. Simply put. So let's look at this first example. 3x plus 6. Now the signs are the same, so there's no need to factor out anything. The plus, we factor out the plus. So then we look at the numbers. So we have the number 3 and we have the number 6. These are the numbers we're looking at. The number 3 and the number 6. We look at 3 and 6 and we think to ourselves, what is the highest common factor between 3 and 6? So we see the highest common factor between 3 and 6 would be, of course, 3. So we factor out the 3 from both of those numbers. So we put this 3 outside here. And then now we move on to factor out. So we factor out the 3 alone. So when we factor out the 3 from the 3x, once again, when you're factorizing, when you're factoring out, you're actually dividing. So this 3 will cancel out to that 3. So we're left with x. And then we go and factor out the 3 from the 6. When you are factorizing or factoring out, you're dividing. I'm repeating this over and over because that is what I want you to keep at the back of your mind or keep at the front of your mind. So 6 divided by 3 would give us 6 divided by 3 would give us 2. So we're left with x plus 2. And that is the end of that example. So let's look at another example. So let's say we had 4x to the second power plus 8x. So once again, we go through the steps. We factor out the signs first. We see a plus, a common positive. So there's no need to factor out the signs. Then we look at the numbers. We see 4 and we see 8. So we know the highest common factor between 4 and 8 would of course be 4. And then now we go to the letters, the variables. So we see the highest common factor between x squared and x would be x. X to the fourth power, x. So the highest common factor that we're factoring out would be 4x. So you put in that 4x outside the bracket and then we factor out now the 4x from the 4x squared. That will give you 4x squared divided by 4x. The 4 will cancel out with 4. And one of this x will cancel out with one of this x. So we're left with x. Then we have 8x divided by 4x. The x will cancel out with the x. 8 divided by 4 would give you 2. So we're left with x plus 2. So one thing to note, how do we know that we have factorized correctly? What we do the distributive law. And when you use the distributive law, you should get back what you had originally at the top. So this is a way of checking to make sure your answer is correct. So let's say we use the distributive law and we distribute 4x times x. That would of course give you 4x squared. And then 4x times 2 would of course give you 8x. So that is how we can know if we have worked it correctly. When we use back the distributive law, we should get back the original expression. So let's take things up a bit. Let's say we have the third one. Let's say we have 9y squared plus 3y. It's very similar to the one that we did just now. So we have 9y squared plus 3y. So we look at the signs. Signs are the same, so there's no need to factor out the signs. So then we look at the numbers. We see 9 and we see 3. So we know the highest common factor between 9 and 3 would simply be 3. That is the highest number that can divide both the 9 and the 3. Then we look at the variables, the letters. So we see the highest common factor between y squared and y would simply be y to the fourth power. That is the highest factor that can divide y squared and y. So we factor out the 3y. So we're left with, so 9y squared divided by 3y would give you, this y will cancel out to one of this y. 9 divided by 3 would give us 3. So we're left with 3y plus 3y divided by 3y. 3y divided by 3y. Any number or any term over itself, we know that is equal to 1. If you had 5 over 5, we know that is equal to 1. So 3y over 3y, 3y divided by 3y would simply be equal to 1. So this will be equal to 1. And of course, we can check to see what we did is correct. So we distributed 3y times 3y. That would give you, of course, 9y squared. And 3y times 1 would, of course, give you 3y. So that is how we know that we have factorized correctly. So let's look at the last example under this way of factorizing. So let's say we had 10ab squared subtract 2bc. Now, one key thing to know when we are looking at the signs, whenever sign is in front of the first term, that is a term here, that is what you're factorizing. So if you have a plus here, you know, a cheat code to factorizing. Whatever sign is in the first term, that is what you're factorizing. So if you have a plus here, you're factorizing that, you're factoring out that plus. So whatever sign is in the first term, you're factoring out that. So it's plus, so there's no need to do anything. So now let's look at the numbers. We have 10 and we have 2. So the highest common factor between 10 and 2 would of course give you 2. So we have 2 as the highest common factor for the numbers. Now let's look at the variables. So we have AB squared and we have BC. So we see A is just here alone. There's no other A. But we have B here and we have B here. We have B squared here and we have B. So B would be the highest common factor there. So we factoring out the 2B. And we have C here, but there's no other C to factor out. There's no other common C. So the highest common factor would be 2B. So we have 10AB squared divided by 2B. 10 divided by 2 would of course give you 5. So this B will cancel out with 1 in the B squared. So we're left with, in bracket, 5AB. Subtract 2BC divided by 2B. So this 2 will cancel out with that 2. This B will cancel with that B. So we're left with 5B minus C. And of course, if you want to check, we can do the distributive law. Let's work this one to make sure this is correct. So we have 2B multiplied by 5AB. So 2 times 5 would give you 10. B times AB will of course give you AB squared. So that checks off. So 2B multiplied by minus C will of course give you minus 2BC. So this checks off as well. So we know what we did is absolutely correct. So let's look at another way of factorizing. Factorizing by grouping. So sometimes you may come across an expression with 4 terms. So when we have 4 terms, we must use this way of factorization, which is by grouping. So we have the expression 2xy plus 4x plus 3y plus 6. So we have 4 terms and we're asked to factorize this expression. So we know how to factorize an expression when we have 2 terms. So what we can do is to work with how we know how to work. So what we do, we group the terms, we pair them off, and then we factorize each bracket individually. So we have the first bracket, which is 2xy plus 4x. Factorize that individually. So we look at the 2xy. Of course, you go through the signs, followed by the numbers, followed by the letters. So we see the 2 and 4, the highest common factor would be 2 between the numbers. And we have x, and we have x in the other term. So the highest common factor between the letters would be x. So when we factor out the 2x from that, we're left with 2xy divided by 2x. This 2 will cancel with that 2. This x will cancel with that x. So we're left with y plus, when you factor out the 2x from the 4x, 4x divided by 2x. This x will cancel with that x. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So we're left with y plus 2. And then we look at the second bracket. What is the highest common factor in the second bracket? So we see you're always factoring out the whatever sign is in front. So we factor out the plus sign. And then we look at the numbers. So we see 3 and 6. We see the highest common factor there would be 3. So when we factor out that 3, we're left with, factor the 3 from the first term, we're left with 3y divided by 3, we're left with y plus, and 6 divided by 3 would give you 2. And what do we notice? We notice that the 2 brackets that we have, they're absolutely the same. And that is the aim. That is one thing you want to do when you're factorizing by grouping. These 2 brackets must be the same after you finish factorizing. If they're not the same, if the signs are different, that means you did something wrong. Everything must be the same. So when it's like that, we know, we can smile and know that we are doing something correct. So what we do, we take what is outside the bracket and we put that in a bracket by itself. So we'll have 2x plus 3. We put that in a bracket. And then we bring down one of the brackets that is the same. So this will be y plus 2. We just bring down any one. So the answer would be 2x plus 3 in one bracket and y plus 2 in another bracket. And of course, you can check to see if your answer is correct by using the distributive law. So you can use the distributive law, and when you work it out, you should get back the original expression that we start out with. So you can do that on your own time to make sure that what we did was absolutely correct. So let's look at two more examples. So let's say we have AB plus 3A plus 2B plus 6. And we're asked to factorize this expression. So of course, we have to use the grouping method. So we pair off. After we finish pairing off, we factorize each bracket individually. So we look at the first bracket, we have AB and we have 3A. We look at the numbers, we don't have any number in common. We look at the variables, we have the A in common, so we factor out that A. And then now, when we factor out the A from the first term, we're left with B. So I'm skipping the division step because by now we should know that we're dividing. And then when we factor out the A from the 3A, we're left with 3. And then we move on to the second bracket. We look at the sign. Once again, you're always factorizing. You're always factoring out the first sign there. This will be plus. And then we look at the numbers. We have 2 and we have 6. The highest common factor there would be 2. And we don't have any variable in common, so we factor out the plus 2. So when we factor out the 2 from the first term, the plus 2 from the first term, we're left with B plus. When we factor out 2 from 6, 6 divided by 2 would of course give you 3. And what do we notice? Our brackets are absolutely the same. So we can smile because we know that we did something correct. So what we do, just like what we did in the previous example, we take what is outside the bracket and we put that in a bracket by itself. So this will be A plus 2 in a bracket. And then we bring down one of the brackets that we had. And this will be B plus 3. And that is how you factorize this example. So let's look at the last example. So let's say we had 6xy minus 9x plus 4y minus 6. And we want to factorize this. Of course, we group the like B. So of course, we pair off. As long as we have 4 terms, we pair off. And then we look at the first bracket. So we have 6xy minus 9x. So we look at the numbers. What is the highest common factor between 6 and 9? We see 3 is the highest common factor between 6 and 9. Then we have xy and we have x. We see x is the common factor. So we factor out the 3x from the first bracket. And now when we factor out 3x, I'll do a little work in here. So 6xy divided by 3x. This x will cancel with that x. 6 divided by 3 would give you 2. So we're left with 2y minus. So we have 9x divided by 3x. This x will cancel with that x. 9 divided by 3 would give us 3. So we have 2y minus 3 after we finish factoring out the 3x. And then we look at the second bracket. Of course, we see the plus. We always factor out whatever sign is in front here. So this will be plus. And then we look at now the numbers. We have 4 and we have 6. So we see the highest common factor there would be 2. And then there we have no variables in common, so we factor out the 2. So when we factor out the 2 from the 4y, 4 divided by 2 would give you 2, and we have y. Subtract 6 divided by 2 would give you 3. So we see our brackets are absolutely the same, so we are absolutely correct. So we have 3x, we put what is outside the bracket in a bracket. So 3x plus 2 and 2y minus 3. Now one thing to note, you may be asking, what if I write 2y minus 3 and 3x plus 2? What if I switch it wrong? What if I forget that, it doesn't matter which order you write the brackets, because that's like if you have 2 multiplied by 5, that will give you 10. 5 multiplied by 2 would give you the same 10. So it does not matter if you put this first and then what is outside the bracket, or you put what is outside the bracket first, it really and truly doesn't matter. Same answer you'll get. And with that, it brings us to the end of this video, and I will leave these 3 for you to try on your own to make sure that you understand fully how to factorize algebraic expressions. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next video.